It was 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday when Katt Williams walked into the crowded food court at Lenox Square Mall in Atlanta. He had some time to kill before a radio interview and figured he'd grab a quick bite in a place where he could observe people, one of his favorite pastimes that often provided material for his comedy. As he stood in line at the Chinese food counter, he noticed a commotion near the seating area. A large man, probably in his mid-30s and built like a linebacker, was standing over a much smaller teenager who was trying to eat lunch alone. "Hey, nerd boy," the big man was saying loud enough for half the food court to hear. "You're sitting at my table." The teenager, who couldn't have been more than 16 and weighed maybe 120 pounds soaking wet, looked up nervously. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know it was reserved. I can move." "Damn right you can move. But first, you're gonna clean up this mess you made." Katt looked closer and saw that there was no mess. The kid had been eating quietly by himself, his books and a laptop spread neatly on the table. This wasn't about a mess or a reserved table. This was pure bullying. "Please, I'll just pack up and leave," the teenager said, starting to gather his things with shaking hands. Nah, the bully said, putting his hand on the kid's shoulder and pushing him back down. "I said clean up first. Get on your hands and knees and wipe down this whole table." Several people in the food court were watching, but nobody was intervening. The kid looked around desperately for help, but most people were either pretending not to see or actively avoiding eye contact. Katt had seen enough. He cancelled his food order and walked over to the table. "Excuse me," he said calmly, approaching the situation. "Is there a problem here?" The bully turned around, sized up Katt, and apparently decided he wasn't impressed. "Yeah, there's a problem. This little punk was disrespecting my table, and now he needs to learn some manners." "Your table?" Katt looked around the food court. "I don't see any reserved signs. Looks like public seating to me." "Look, little man," the bully said, stepping closer to Katt. "This ain't your business. Keep walking before you end up like your boyfriend here." Katt smiled, which seemed to confuse the bully. "What's your name, big guy?" "What? Your name? What do people call you?" "Why do you want to know?" "Because I like to know who I'm talking to. I'm Katt Williams." The bully paused, recognizing the name but not quite placing it. So I'm curious about what kind of man picks on kids half his size in public. What's your story?" "My story is none of your damn business." "Actually, it kind of is my business now," Katt said, his voice still calm but carrying more authority. "See, I have a choice here. I can walk away and let you continue terrorizing this kid, or I can stick around and see what happens next. What do you think I should do?" The bully looked around and noticed that more people were watching now. "I think you should mind your own business before I make it your business." "Threats now? Interesting." Katt pulled out his phone. "You know what? Let me help you out. I'm going to record this conversation so we can all be clear about what's happening here." "Put that phone away." "Why? You seemed pretty confident about your position 30 seconds ago. What changed?" The teenager, still sitting at the table, looked back and forth between Katt and his tormentor with a mixture of hope and terror. "Look," the bully said, his voice slightly less aggressive now. "The kid disrespected me. I'm just teaching him some manners." "How exactly did he disrespect you?" He was sitting at my table. Your table that has no reservation sign and is in a public food court." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Katt asked. "Help me understand. You're a grown man, probably. This kid is maybe 120 pounds, and was sitting here minding his own business. Where's the disrespect?" The bully was clearly getting frustrated with Katt's calm questioning. "You don't understand? Then explain it to me. And to everyone else who's watching." Katt gestured to the growing crowd of onlookers. "Explain to all these people why this situation required your intervention." "I don't have to explain anything to you." "You're right, you don't. But let me explain something to you." Katt's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it now. This young man was sitting here peacefully, bothering nobody, probably studying or doing homework. You decided to turn his lunch into a nightmare for your own amusement. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are, who I am. You don't know anything about me. I know you're a bully. I know you pick on people who can't fight back. I know you get some kind of sick satisfaction from making others feel small and powerless. The bully's face was getting red. Watch your mouth. Or what? You'll do to me what you were planning to do to him. Katt stepped closer. Here's the thing about bullies. They only pick fights they think they can win. So let me ask you something. Do you think you can win this one? I could snap you in half. Maybe, but are you prepared for what happens after that? Are you ready for the assault charges? The video that'll be all over social media. The explanation you'll have to give your employer about why you attacked a comedian in a mall food court. The bully hesitated, clearly not having thought through the consequences. Because that's what this is now. Katt continued. This isn't just you picking on some random kid anymore. This is you threatening a public figure in front of dozens of witnesses. How do you think that's going to work out for you? The teenager finally spoke up, his voice barely audible. I can just leave. I don't want any trouble. Katt turned to him. What's your name, young man? Jeremy. Jeremy Washington. Well, Jeremy Washington, you're not going anywhere. You have just as much right to be here as anyone else. Katt looked back at the bully. In fact, I think Jeremy was here first. So if anyone should leave, it's the person who showed up and started causing problems. This is bullshit, the bully muttered. Is it? Let me ask you something else. Why are you really doing this? What do you mean? I mean, what's going on in your life that makes you feel the need to intimidate teenagers in shopping malls? Because this isn't about a table. This is about something else. For the first time, the bully's aggressive facade cracked slightly. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not. But I know that hurt people, and you seem like someone who's carrying a lot of hurt. The unexpected compassion in Katt's voice seemed to catch the bully off guard. I'm not. Look, man, I don't know what's going on in your world. Maybe you're having a bad day, a bad week, a bad year. Maybe someone's been making you feel small and you thought you'd pass that feeling along to someone else. But this kid isn't responsible for whatever's eating at you. The bully looked at Jeremy, then back at Katt, then at the crowd that had gathered. For a moment, something almost like shame flickered across his face. I lost my job last week, he said quietly. My wife left. I came here to think, and I saw him sitting there with his books and his computer, looking like everything was easy for him.
Katt nodded slowly. So you decided to make his day as bad as yours? I guess, yeah. How's that working out for you? Do you feel better now? The bully looked around at all the people staring at him, then down at Jeremy, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. No, he admitted. I feel like shit. Katt sat down at the table across from Jeremy. What's your name? He asked the bully. Mike. Mike Thompson. Sit down, Mike. What? Sit down. All three of us are going to have a conversation. Mike hesitated, then slowly sat down at the table he'd been claiming was his. Jeremy, Katt said, tell Mike what you were doing before he showed up. Jeremy looked nervous but answered, I was studying for my AP physics test and working on my college application essay. Where are you hoping to go to college? MIT, if I can get in. I want to study aerospace engineering. Katt turned to Mike. So you were about to humiliate a kid who's trying to get into MIT to study aerospace engineering. How do you feel about that? Mike stared at the table. Pretty awful. Mike, what did you used to do for work? I was a foreman at a construction company, 20 years. That's skilled work, important work. Jeremy, did you know that aerospace engineers and construction foremen actually have a lot in common? Both jobs require understanding complex systems, managing teams, solving problems under pressure. Jeremy looked interested despite the awkward situation. Really? Absolutely. Mike, I bet you've overseen projects that required the same kind of precision and attention to detail that Jeremy's going to need as an engineer. Mike looked up at Jeremy for the first time without hostility. Yeah, I guess. I've built some complicated stuff. Jeremy, have you ever thought about how the buildings and infrastructure that enable space programs get built? Not really, but that's a good point. Katt leaned back in his chair. Mike, losing your job isn't the end of the world, and taking out your frustration on Jeremy wouldn't have changed anything about your situation. I know. I was just angry. At who? At everything. At my boss, who laid me off after 20 years. At my wife, who said she couldn't handle being married to someone without ambition. At myself, for not seeing it coming. And at Jeremy for having something you felt like you'd lost, hope for the future. Mike nodded, looking ashamed. Jeremy,
Katt said. What do you think Mike should do next? Jeremy thought for a moment. Maybe he should focus on getting a new job instead of picking on people who aren't responsible for his problems. That's fair. Mike, the kid's right. I was being an ass. You were. But here's what I think happened. I think you're scared. Losing your job, your wife leaving. That's enough to make anyone feel powerless. And when people feel powerless, sometimes they try to exert power over someone else to feel in control again. Yeah, that's probably right. But did it work? Do you feel more in control now? No, I feel worse. Katt pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Mike, I want you to call this number tomorrow morning. It's a friend of mine who runs a construction company. Tell him Katt Williams gave you his number. And tell him what happened here today. All of it. Why would you? Because I believe people can change. Because I think you're better than what you showed us today. And because sometimes when we're at our lowest point, we need someone to remind us that we're not our worst moment. Mike stared at the phone number. What if he doesn't want to hire someone who was bullying kids in mall food courts? Then he'll tell you that. But what if he respects the fact that you're owning up to your mistake and trying to do better? Jeremy spoke up. For what it's worth, Miss Thompson, you seem like a different person than you were 10 minutes ago. Mike looked at Jeremy with something approaching respect. You're pretty mature for a kid. I'm 17. And you're pretty different when you're not trying to intimidate people. Katt stood up. Gentlemen, I think my work here is done. Mike, you're going to call that number tomorrow. Jeremy, you're going to ace that physics test and get into MIT. And both of you are going to remember that we're all fighting battles that other people can't see. As Katt prepared to leave, Mike stood up. Mr. Williams, why did you do all this? Why didn't you just call security or walk away? Because I've been Jeremy before, the small guy getting picked on. And honestly, I've been you before too. Angry at the world and looking for someone to blame. The difference is someone showed me a better way. What better way? That your pain doesn't give you the right to hurt other people. But it also doesn't make you irredeemable. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. 3 months later, Katt received 2 text messages on the same day. The first was from Jeremy. Got accepted to MIT. Thanks for showing me that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean fighting. The second was from Mike. 6 weeks into the new job. My boss says I'm the best foreman he's hired in years. Thanks for giving me a second chance when I didn't deserve it. Katt smiled and showed both messages to his assistant. Sometimes, he said, the best comedy comes from real life, and sometimes the best real life comes from remembering that everyone has a story worth understanding. Because the truth is, in every bully there's someone who feels powerless. And in every victim there's someone with more strength than they know. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to see both sides and help write a better ending.